All right. Hello, everybody. I'm excited to have everybody here in the room and online in our session on science advised by Young Academies on critical issues. Before we start, I'd like to first acknowledge Nshemereirwe, who's been really instrumental in putting this session together. I call her the chair of the session, and she's the boss. I learned a lot in the process of working with her on this session. Together with Nshemereirwe, I'll be moderating the session, and my name is Hussam Mahmoud. I am currently a member and the co-chair of NASM New Voices. And one of the things we'd like to do before we get started is kind of to orient everybody in terms of what the Global Young Academy or Young Academies in general do and what they're all about. So I'm just a few slides to share on that. So the World Young Academies, they exist to act as voices, work on different interdisciplinary issues. Scientific excellence is very important to what the Young Academies do. And in order for them generally to be selected, they have to have commitment to service to society. There are 54 national Young Academies that exist now, plus transitional ones. And there are similar organizations and young scientific or scientist networks that exist around the world. Typically, it's formed by post-PhD, early and mid-career scientists and scholars, selected on the basis of excellence in research, impact, and commitment to service. And the landscape is quite diverse in terms of structure, funding level of independence, and so on. And as I mentioned, there are 54 academies that are affiliated with national science academies. There has been a lot going on with these individual young academies, but there is interesting work that goes on jointly. And in fact, today I spoke with our friends and colleagues from the Canadian Royal Society of Canada College to see if we can do something together with New Voices. But of course, there's a lot going on already. Here are just some examples on joint statements that were issued in 2017, Role of Young Academies in Achieving the UN Sustainability Development Goals, and 2019 Declaration on the Guiding Principles of Young Academies. There are other activities, at-risk scholars or open science, joint meetings, whether they're worldwide or regional meetings. And the first ever joint meeting between European Young Academies and established science academies was in May 2022 in Belgium. The Global Young Academy is independent Young Academy with its own membership and activities, and it is a facilitator, not an umbrella organization for all the academies. And because the facilitators, the strategic aims is to maintain the website and communication channels, co-organize joint meetings or activities, similar to this one, collecting and sharing best practices for establishment of a Young Academy. Because I'm chair of the New Voices, I'm excited that we're going to have some presentation today on the New Voices, but I'd like to show you the landscape of where the members are. There has been tremendous involvement, despite how fresh and young the New Voices global organization is. There has been tremendous peak in activities that members get involved with that vary from organizing events, chairing National Academy workshops, publications, briefings, reports, and many other things. And the experience has been tremendously rewarding. So our first speaker is going to be talking about that exact experience. So let me first introduce the speaker. We will start with Dr. Patricia Silveyra, who will introduce us to new and wonderful initiatives of the NASM New Voices and highlight the immense diversity of the New Voices members in terms of sectors, disciplines, and racial and ethnic groups. She will also touch on the spike in the involvement of New Voices members in different NASM activities, which I am personally very excited about. Dr. Silveyra is the Anthony Pantalino eminent scholar, associate professor, and endowment chair of the Department of Environmental and Occupational Health at Indiana University, Bloomington School of Public Health. In 2013, she established her research program as an assistant professor, and in between 2015 and 16, she served as the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Education at Penn State College of Medicine. From 2018 to 2020, she led the Biobehavioral Laboratory at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And in 2021, she joined Indiana University Bloomington. She served on enormous number of national organizations and committees committed to increase representation of women and minorities in STEM, including the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos, Hispanics, and Native Americans in Science, where she was a board member and treasurer. She was part of the first cohort as a member and co-chair of the U.S. National Academy's New Voices. So I personally learned a lot from her when I joined the program. She has represented New Voices NASM at worldwide meetings, Young Academies, conferences, and she's currently serving a second term on the NASM board on higher education and workforce. And without further ado, I'd like Patricia to, the video to start for Patricia. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for inviting me to speak in this session. My name is Patricia Silveyra, and I am a member and former co-chair of New Voices in Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, which is a similar body to a national Young Academy in the United States. New Voices was a project of the United States National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. And it was created as an initiative to bring diverse perspectives from early career United States leaders to important dialogues around how science, engineering, and medicine are shaping the global future. The program was made possible thanks to support from the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation. Initially, 18 members were selected out of a pool of over 500 applicants, and they represent 12 different states of the United States with a variety of gender, ethnic, and race diversity. The initial cohort had 6 senior advisors that were Academy members, and it was divided into 3 co-chairs for the leadership, representing industry, academia, and policy. Following the 2-year pilot, New Voices, as we like to call ourselves, finalized the first cohort and recruited a second cohort. The second cohort is ongoing. It started in 2021. I happen to be part of both cohorts to provide a liaison. And the second cohort, because it started at the very end of the lockdown due to the pandemic, most of our meetings are either hybrid or virtual. But on the right, you see a picture of the members of one of our most recent meetings in the National Academies. You can see that we represent a variety of racial and ethnic backgrounds. We also represent different countries of origins and sectors of the society. Our mission statement that was established by the first cohort is to build a coalition of diverse and emerging leaders to inform the work of the national academies and enhance scientific and policy solutions to national and global challenges. And we accomplish this mission with a number of strategic objectives, of which I am going to talk about today, along the different activities that we have engaged on to interact and provide advice to the senior academies. So our first objective is to bring diverse expertise and innovative perspectives to the national academies. As I mentioned, both our cohorts provide a combination of sectors of the society, sectors of science, engineering, and medicine, disciplines, and racial and ethnic groups. And among these different sectors, we have academics, we have people who work in industry, we have members of government, of national laboratories, people who do consulting as in science, people who have startup companies, and people who work in the nonprofit and for-profit sectors. At the same time, within the sciences, engineering, and medicine, we have different medical specialties. We have biomedical scientists. We have different types of engineers, computational scientists, environmental scientists, people who work in pharmaceutical companies, and a variety of basic scientists represented. To provide diverse expertise and innovative perspectives to the national academies, we conduct a number of activities. One example is to be part of formal roles in projects that the academies organize, meaning committees, roundtables, or different discussions that they host. On the right is an example of some of our members who have been nominated and have served in these bodies at the national academies. And you can see in some of the recent publications of the academies that our names are represented. At the same time, because collectively we have a wide network of professionals, we can nominate our colleagues and our peers to serve in these bodies and these projects or activities, because we communicate regularly with the senior academies where we know when these projects are being planned, so we can reach out to experts that otherwise the academies would not have access to. Similarly, we can co-organize events with the senior academies. Here's an example of a panel that we hosted in 2019, where we brought leaders from national laboratories, industries, the National Institutes of Health, National Science Foundation, the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, and other organizations to discuss what are the challenges and opportunities to diversify the STEM workforce. So all these different leaders have dealt with the same issue in their respective sectors. However, we were able to bring them all together and establish some common solutions and challenges that we wanted to further discuss. As a result of this discussion, we published an op-ed where we provided a summary of what we learned and where we should concentrate moving forward. And this was a collective effort between New Voices and the national academies, hosted at the academies. Similarly, we can also nominate and even act as speakers in events that the national academies organizes. Picture on the bottom right, you see our own Darshan Karwat from New Voices cohort number 2, being a panelist in the Endless Frontier Symposium hosted last month. And you can see Darshan there interacting with senior leaders of our government in topics that relate to climate change and future actions. At the same time, we can provide our network and connections to the academies. And in order to optimize this process, New Voices Cohort 1 piloted, and New Voices Cohort 2 is continuing to develop a Mapbox networking tool. The objective of this tool is to provide direct access or easier access to connections that each of our New Voices members have. And these connections can be related to whether it is geographical location, prior collaborations in projects, scientific discipline, participation in similar professional societies, and more. This network is continuously being developed, and hopefully very soon it will be launched. At the same time, we utilize our network to engage in some of the projects that as New Voices have tackled on. One of our main objectives is to provide science to sectors where science is not present continuously. One of them is young kids. So in order to provide outreach to young kids, one of our members published 2 books named The Secret Lives of Scientists, Engineers, and Doctors, where he took advantage of our networks and ourselves and created cartoons of different scientists, speaking about their stories and how they became scientists in a narrative that is tailored for young children. We were able to provide access to this opportunity to people in our networks, thanks to being part of New Voices. This picture if you haven't been outside, the people who are in Arizona, go outside. This is at Biosphere. This was our last meeting as New Voices One. Only a few of us could attend because the pandemic was about to start and the flights were starting to be canceled. So it was very good that we were there together, because the people that you see in this picture represent different types of scientists, from molecular biologists to medical doctors to computational scientists and chemists and behavioral scientists. So collectively, we sat down and we, first of all, discussed what can we do to help with this pandemic that is started. So first thing we did was we wrote an op-ed with our opinion and our advice, and not only to the senior academies, but also to the rest of the population, in what should be the best steps that the US should take in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, because of our combined expertise in medicine, science, and computational science, we were able to develop a chat box that was curated by experts and was easily accessible to the general public to answer common questions about COVID-19 using artificial intelligence. And you can see here, our chatbot was named Jennifer, and it was used for several months at the beginning of the pandemic. And we took advantage of our networks to engage with people who were knowledgeable about this topic, and continuously reading and curating the literature in order to provide the most accurate information to the people who were asking us questions. And at the same time, we took advantage of our connections with the Federation of American Scientists through Dr. Nouri, who is one of our New Voices One members. And we created a COVID-19 task force that we were able to engage with within people at New Voices and outside. Collectively, just for New Voices One, we have some metrics. We share about 11,500 Slack messages and over 3,000 volunteer hours in the projects that we engaged on to provide advice to the senior academies. Some of us, the members of New Voices continue to provide science advice at even higher levels, even when they stop being members of the first cohort. One example is Dr. Frances Colon. She was named at the PCAST, which is the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, and she continues to provide advice to the White House. Our own Dr. Berge, she was recently confirmed as the Office of Science Director for the Department of Energy. And our own Ali Nouri, former co-chair of New Voices One, he was recently sworn in as an Assistant Secretary in the Department of Energy, where he is going to be working on clean energy initiatives. And finally, an example from what New Voices 2 is doing. Recently, they provided an editorial that was published in the JEE journal, where they discuss topics about how climate change is imminent and continues to happen, and how engineering education and education in general should incorporate these topics related to climate change and sustainability. So at different points and at different levels, we are providing advice not only to the senior academies, but also to scientists in general and the government. And so we believe that initiatives like New Voices are very helpful in these discussions. So with that, I'm going to end by inviting you to connect with us. Even though there's 2 cohorts and one of them is already over, we continue to be connected, we continue to work together and network, and we hope that our cohorts will continue to grow and continue to make an impact and provide advice to the senior academies. I am going to be available for questions, as I understand, but enjoy the meeting, enjoy Arizona, and have fun. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you very much. This was a wonderful presentation, Patricia. Excellent overview of NASM New Voices, and very exciting work the New Voices members are involved in. And now that Patricia kind of told us about the wonderful science advice, mechanisms and opportunities the New Voices program were and are involved in, and the impact of these opportunities on careers, we've seen perfect examples of how different people manage to make their way up from a career perspective. Dr. Connie Nshemereirwe is going to walk us through her own experience. How do you ultimately get involved with Young Academies? She had a different path to get there, and how she ended up working at the interface between science and policy, and why science advice from younger academies is relevant. So let's play her video and listen to her remarks. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for inviting me to speak in this session. My name is Patricia Silveyra, and I am a member and former co-chair of New Voices in
Yes.
Sorry about that.
Which is a similar body to a national Young Academy
Hold on one
in
second.
the United States. New Voices was a project of the United States National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. And it was created as an initiative to bring diverse perspectives from early.
Good day to you all. I'm delighted to be able to join you advice by Young Academies and to share some thoughts on how early career researchers can participate in the science advice enterprise, especially when they are organized in structures such as National Young Academies. It might be relevant to state, first of all, that I identify as a science and policy facilitator. I used to be an academic, and many people ask me how I came to take on this identity. Well, it started in 2015, barely a year after I had received my PhD, when I attended a workshop on policy-engaged research methods given by the Partnership for African Social and Governance Research, an organization that's based in Nairobi, where they invited academics, scientists, researchers, and policy actors to participate in a workshop together. And it was the first time that I was able to directly engage with policy actors. And I remember being really surprised within the first few hours at how little I knew about the concerns of policy actors. And in fact, I began to really question my entire PhD because I realized that my questions had been entirely of my own curiosity to meet this curiosity of mine, rather than answer questions that were of concern to policy actors. And I remember that after I left that training, I came back home, I came back to Uganda, and I made it a point to really seek out ministry officials, to seek out school leaders, to seek out all the other actors within the education system, because my research field is in education, so that I could understand better what it was they thought were the most pertinent questions, so that we could collaborate on coming up with questions that were of importance to them as well. And the second thing that happened soon after is that I was part of the inaugural cohort of the Africa Science Leadership Program that runs every year at the University of Pretoria. And one of the things that I learned when I went to this science leadership workshop was the fact that, especially as Africans who are so highly educated, when we have a PhD, we just have an inherent position of leadership within our societies. But many of us do not realize this. But even when we realize this, we do not really have the frameworks or the skills by which to go about providing leadership. And so we don't know where to start, we don't know what to do. And what the Africa Science Leadership Program helped me realize was, first of all, that I was a leader, but also it gave me the skills and the tools to critically analyze the societal issues that we faced as Africans, and also to see the angle which I could approach the problems that we had in collaboration with the societal issues. And the third thing that happened to me that led me to this thinking of myself as this science and policy facilitator, a person who is at the interface between science and policy, was being elected to become a member of the Global Young Academy. And here again, I was given the platform to participate in global science and policy conversations. And I saw the importance of the diverse views that scientists from different cultural backgrounds, scientists from different disciplinary backgrounds could bring to bear on a discussion of all the common global challenges that we have. And being a part of this Global Young Academy, and later on also being invited to join the National Young Academy of Uganda, brought all these past experiences of mine, meeting policymakers and understanding that it wasn't just my view on the problem that mattered, getting skills through the Science Leadership Program, and now getting in touch with all these excellent young scientists from across the world in the Global Young Academy, but also from across my country in Uganda. And the National Young Academy in Uganda has a very close working relationship with the Senior Academy, which meant that we have plenty of opportunities to participate in national science and policy conversations. And all these things put together convinced me that there was this gap that needed to be filled by people like myself who understand the science side of things, but also appreciate the work that policy actors do and the need for those two sides to talk to one another. And so all I'm saying is that early career researchers have a very big opportunity to contribute directly to the application of science in responding to our societal needs, whether they are at a global or at a national level. And whether we know it or accept it, we have a responsibility to translate the science that we do so that it can be useful to the general public, because policy actors at all levels continue to struggle with the same old problems, and especially in contexts like mine, in a country like Uganda or continent-wide across Africa. Policy actors continue to struggle with issues and implement suboptimal solutions simply because perhaps scientists do not investigate the phenomena that are the most pertinent, or when they do investigate those phenomena, they put the knowledge out there and they expect that these policy actors will find it and be able to interpret it. So the opportunity is really very great for young scientists, especially when we are organized through structures like National Young Academies, and especially when we work in collaboration with our senior academies. We have the opportunity to assemble excellent young scientists from various disciplines to come together and really look at at our societal issues from all sorts of angles and work with policy actors to arrive at solutions or ways to address the issues that are better informed and well thought out together with the policy actors. And so I hope that the national Young Academies and the senior academies that are present at this meeting really feel that we can make more of the opportunity to partner with one another as early career researchers and senior researchers or more established researchers, but also with the wider policy community to ensure that all the good science that we produce can be deployed for the good of science. I thank you very much for your attention, and I wish us all a good meeting.
Thank you, Connie. And Dr. Connie gave us a really nice overview of her career. And she reflected on a wonderful path that she crafted and created herself. No one held her hand to get her to where she is now. And that, of course, she reflected also about on science leadership and science policy. And she clearly saw the importance of what scientists from different cultures and disciplines can bring to bear different viewpoints to address complex and national and international issues. And of course, this is much more effective than seeking advice from a senior researcher, in my opinion, that has done wonderful in the research, but have never given a science advice. And so it's really important to reflect on having somebody who's providing advice that I have done really well in their careers in general, but at the same time have been trained to give advice at younger age. However, the science advice to senior academy is not the only reason why younger academies provide science advice. And so Dr. Yoko Shimpuku is going to talk to us about the benefits of providing scientific advice to citizens and the population at large. Dr. Shimpuku is an associate professor in the Department of Human Health Sciences, Graduate School of Medicine at Kyoto University, Japan. She's a midwifery researcher in global health, conducting evaluation research to improve mental and child health in Africa for more than 11 years. She has been conducting research to improve midwifery care and create a community to support pregnant women and their families in Tanzania. She has been closely working for research and education for the World Health Organization, collaborating center to create an evaluation tool to measure people-centered care. She's currently the vice chair of Young Academy of Japan under Science Council of Japan. She's also the executive committee on the executive committee of the Global Young Academy and works to support young scientists everywhere. She has done much more involvement than this. And without any further introduction, let's see what her remarks are. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Yoko Shimpuku from Hiroshima University. I'm a member of GYA and the former vice chair of Young Academy of Japan. Today I'm going to talk about science advice activity of the Young Academy of Japan. In my presentation, science advice is not limited to advice to policymakers or governments. I include promotion of science too and collaboration with general citizens. I'd like to introduce a little bit of myself. I'm a nurse midwife by profession, majoring in global health, and received my PhD in 2010. After 7 years from my completion of my PhD, I encountered a call for membership for Young Academy of Japan. Becoming a member of Young Academy totally changed my horizon. I learned how important and fun it is to work with researchers in the same generation from different fields. And I was selected as one of 20 young scientists by IAP for attending the Science Leadership Program in World Science Forum in Jordan. I also learned how fascinating it is to participate in international collaboration among young scientists. Because of this experience, a year after, I became a member of the Global Young Academy and served as executive committee for 3 years. YAJ has executive committee and 8 subcommittees for promoting interdisciplinary and international activities to improve research environment and to create new kinds of collaboration that can result in innovation. We have an introduction video for YAJ, so please access to the video if you want to know more about us. We had activities related to science advice. For example, we collaborated with INSA and GYA for science advice workshop for young scientists when the INSA had a biannual meeting in Tokyo. One of our key activities is promotion of citizen science. We had several symposia to discuss with different stakeholders in multiple regions. And in 2019, I was dispatched to G-Science, the G7 Science Academy meeting, and I was assigned to the topic of citizen science in the internet era. I found a little differences in the discussion. In YAJ, we are trying to promote more collaboration with different stakeholders, but in the meeting, I found more focus on setting rules and controls so that research ethics and rigors are protected. So I brought this discussion to our promotion of citizen science in YAJ. In addition, as a young female scientist, I was quite noticeable in the group, and the chair asked me some questions about Young Academy, so I explained them and brought the voice of young scientists to the high-level meeting. After that, YAJ published a statement on aiming to build a social system that promotes citizen science. And the main points include promotion for expanding citizen science for knowledge generation, development of infrastructure to maintain research ethics in citizen science, development of infrastructure for social collaboration to promote citizen science, and establish a research funding system to support the activities of citizen scientists. Writing a statement is a kind of science advice. While we are writing this, we discuss with policymakers and others how we develop the system and implement citizen science in Japan. This year, the GYA and YAJ co-hosted the 12th Annual General Meeting and International Conference of Young Scientists 2022. It was a hybrid meeting based in Kyushu University, Fukuoka. There are nearly 800 participants from 80 countries. The theme was harmonizing reason with sensibility, regenerating science for an inclusive and sustainable future. We discussed the importance of dialogue among scientists in different backgrounds and disciplines, as well as other stakeholders and citizens. To do that, harmonizing reason with sensibility, such as emotional intelligence, common sense, and cultural sensibilities are important, and this harmonization is a key for revitalizing creativity. And we set citizen science as one of the session topics of the conference. This time, we focus more on implementation of citizen science. There is a Citizen Science Research Center in Fukuoka University. The center's activities were created based on our statement of citizen science. So we invited Dr. Omi to present development of citizen scientists and creation of a small library in a green tea cafe in the town, as well as a new project in Dazaifu City about developing new products with palm fruits in collaboration with mayor and high school students. So we learned a lot that implementation of citizen science is a great potential for revitalizing a local community, which is a main interest of the local government or mayor. So there could be more collaboration like that in the context of Japan. Another example was a collaboration with NHK, the public broadcaster. They created an online platform for citizen science called Citizen Lab. Through this website, citizens can send information and photos related to the topics. For example, a cicada project calls for photos, and there are so many different kinds of cicada photos were collected here. Then a researcher can advise the kind of cicada, and they can map how different kinds of cicada are distributed over Japan. This is another potential, as the TV can draw lots of attention from citizens all over Japan. So even the topics was a bit rare, they could find informants from all over Japan. We report these kind of activities to policymakers in ministries as well. So we use multiple approaches, including informing policymakers, work with local governments, as well as activities with general citizens. I believe that it is a way to transform society through science advice, incorporating different points of view so that the society is transformed in a way that not only we scientists believe good, but also everyone feels it's a good change for them. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks so much, Yoko, for a very nice presentation. Very interesting on different mechanisms of providing science advice and how you're doing that actually for citizens through citizen science. It doesn't have to be just the senior academy. The importance of providing science to people where they feel that they can relate to you when you give them the advice, I think, is a very important issue. The next presentation is Dr. Jacek Kolanowski. He will elaborate on the role of diversity and inclusion of early and mid-career scientists in providing excellent advice. But then the reality is that the picture is not as rosy as one would like to think. There are challenges and hurdles that we as early and mid-career scientists will have to overcome so that we can be more effective in providing the advice. Dr. Kolanowski is an early career group leader in chemical biology and head of an advanced research infrastructure for drug discovery at the Institute of Bioorganic Chemistry of the Polish Academy of Sciences. He has been leading and participating in over 30 national and international research projects with partners from various disciplines and sectors. In 2019, he became a member of the Polish Young Academy, which he has chaired since 2022. And since 2020, he has also been the president of the Young Academies Science Advice Structure, which is now an official partner in the Science Advice Mechanism for the European Commission. He uses his international research background and expertise to bring together early and mid-career researchers across Europe to advocate for and work towards greater participation in science policy and science advice. And now we'd like to hear from Dr. Kolanowski about his remarks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jacek Kolanowski, and I'm an early career group leader in chemical biology at the Institute of Bioorganic Chemistry, Polish Academy of Sciences. I'm also chairing the Polish Young Academy and the Young Academy Science Advice Structure. Today, we will be hearing statements on providing scientific evidence-based advice on various levels. I'd like to focus on one of these levels in particular, which is called the Science Advice for Policy. But most of the points I will discuss are relevant for all other types of advice by EMCRs. Unlike science policy, or policy for science as it's called, which aims at the policies for the scientific sector, the science advice for policy, on the other hand, aims at providing scientific evidence to inform policies in other sectors like health, technology, energy, transport, and so on. Traditionally, science advice for policy is seen as a space for the most experienced and senior scientists. One of the reasons behind this is a cultural and systemic misconception equating the scientific excellence with seniority. Fortunately, recent changes in the ways excellence in science is recognized aims at removing this bias. Another critical prerequisite for high quality and comprehensive advice is diversity of perspectives, whether through involvement of variable disciplines, gender, cultural or geographic diversity, or diversity in career stages. Over time, as both approaches and topics in research change, the scientists coming to the scene at different periods develop original and complementary expertise to their predecessors, increasing the breadth of perspectives and therefore the comprehensiveness of advice. So if we want to ensure high quality of advice, we need to get involved EMCRs in the process. Currently, this is not the case. In my opinion, the major reason behind this is the fact that EMCRs are expected to provide advice in their free time rather than a part of their professional work, which puts additional strain also on their work-life balance and make it unsustainable. In order to increase the participation of EMCRs in scientific advice, it is critical to work on changes in the reward and recognition systems in academia to enable the inclusion of those activities in the evaluation of career progression and the scientific excellence. This is also connected with promotion of the diverse research career paths and changing the academic culture that perceives the non-traditional careers either as an indulgence or as a failure. Finally, the increase in the involvement of EMCRs in scientific advice requires broader access to training and practice opportunities. And as an example of such opportunity, I would like to give you the scientific advice mechanism for European Commission, also called SAM. What differs SAM from other scientific advice mechanisms is that the advice is provided on the request of the policymakers, which ensures that the advice is included later on in the legislation process. Something very difficult to achieve through a bottom-up approach where it is the scientists who come with the advice to the policymaker as a client. In addition, the independence of the scientific and the scientific excellence of the advice in SAM is ensured by passing the policymakers' request to the consortium of the networks of European academies called SAPIA. This is a project which combines 120 academies and thousands of researchers. And its aim is to provide the evidence-based review reports to inform policymaking, but also to optimize the mechanism, the process of science advice. I was fortunate enough to become a part of this mechanism through assuming a position of the first president of the Young Academies Science Advice Structure, or YASAS as we call it. YASAS is the first formalized network of European Young Academies, and it was created in 2020 specifically to participate in the SAPIA activities. Since 2022, YASAS is officially one of 5 equal partners in the network, giving a very significant voice and platform to EMCRs to shape the scientific advice at the EU level. Within the SAPIA project, apart from the involvement in the activities of the whole consortium, we are also carrying out a specific task focused in particular on EMCRs in science advice for policy. This task aims at mapping the relevant EMCRs organizations as potential pool of experts, collecting best practices and information on the challenges associated with the involvement of the EMCRs in the SAM, and also proposing the improvements to the SAM mechanism in this regard. All of this aims at increasing the quality and comprehensiveness of scientific advice by improving the diversity and inclusiveness of the process. Through YASAS and SAPIA, we can also provide EMCRs with opportunities to get involved in the science advice mechanism by becoming an expert in the working group, creating evidence-based review reports, or by contributing your suggestions to changes in the mechanisms of SAM. So if you're interested in learning more about SAM, SAPIA, or YASAS, or get involved in our processes, do not hesitate to contact us under the address yasas.board@gmail.com. And I'm also looking forward to meeting you and answering any questions in the QA session. Thank you.
All right. Another great presentation by Jacek, who really raised a lot of really important points. One of the fascinating ones that I found is that who provides the advice? Young Academies goes and say, hey, we think this is important, you should look at. Or is it the senior academy that top-bottom approach, where they will come to the Young Academy and say, we would like for you to look at this? It's you have to get, as a Young Academy, you have to get their trust perhaps first by providing advice before they come to you and say, yeah, interesting, now I would like to, you to look at 1, 2, or 3. That's really interesting. So I think excellent presentation, and I could come up with a bazillion questions, but I'd like maybe to ask our first panelist, Patricia. I think she's online. Can we have, yes, I can see you. Yeah, perfect. So, Patricia, the New Voices, so the New Voices program has been a success, obviously, and has taken off very rapidly. Because you were a member and co-chair of Cohort 1 and very kindly passed a lot of your knowledge to Cohort 2, and you're now a member of Cohort 2. What would you say has been the biggest obstacle in getting the New Voices program going? There are 54 Young Academies around the world, and there's, from what I hear, so many initiatives going on right now. What advice would you give other Young Academies or programs that can help them get things moving quickly based on your experience? And if you could please reflect on your involvement with the Argentinian Young Academy, perhaps obstacles they have faced and what can be done to help other younger academies, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure, thanks, Hussam. It's good to see you. I hope you're enjoying Arizona. So as I reflect on this question, I think one of the biggest obstacles happens when teams get together for the first time. Getting people feeling comfortable working with each other is a challenge, especially since we get selected for these groups based on so many accomplishments that we already have, that getting to a place where you know that everybody around you is super accomplished generates a lot of imposter syndrome. So people are afraid of stepping in sometimes. And I have observed this in the 2 cohorts. So what I would recommend to young academies that are starting or onboarding new members is to take some time to get to know each other, maybe learn about the different leadership styles, address imposter syndrome, address the fact that you have a safe space, people feel comfortable challenging stuff and sharing their opinions and not feeling that they're going to be criticized or evaluated. And also because there's going to be so many ideas and so many things that are almost impossible to tackle together. So get organized, establish committees, divide and conquer, be flexible. What's going to happen, and I observe also this in the 2 cohorts, is that people are going to get promoted at work, or they're going to be called to serve somewhere else, or their responsibilities are going to shift, or they're going to have families. So there has to be an understanding of flexibility and continuous planning around the projects that are developed so that you don't get slowed down. I think that's probably my advice regarding the first part of the question. Regarding the second part of the question, with the Argentinian Academy, I haven't really been involved in their development other than just providing input from what I have learned, being part of the US Academy and offering help in terms of, you need networking, you need help with any projects, you need assistance promoting your activities on social media, amplifying some of their messages, connecting you with potential speakers. So expanding the network and just showing them that we are available and that we are ready to help if we need to. But when I tried to intervene too much, there was a little bit of hesitancy. So I didn't try to be too pushy, just to show that I was here and available. And that was enough and very appreciated.
Thank you. This is great. So, Jacek is kind of follow up on that comment that Patricia made. And as a member of cohort 2, one of the challenges that was we're getting together, we're trying to figure out as cohort members, what is it that we really want to do? And you've touched on that in your presentation when you talked about top-down versus bottom-up approach for providing advice. To help younger academies establish things quickly, would it be easier if it was a top-down approach at the beginning to get things moving, and then we start the bottom up later by providing advice on issues that we think matter? Can you just reflect on that? Because I don't want to leave that thought that you put in your comment alone, because I think it was great. Jacek?
Sorry. All right. Thanks again for having me here. And Hussam, I think that it should be both in a way. So I think that the initiative has to be the bottom up in a way from the early career researchers who are interested in kind of like providing or giving their own time and energy to do this type of work. But I think one of the easiest ways to get this started is when the existing structures provide a platform where you can immediately kind of like find yourself in and start to contribute. So whether it is, as you mentioned, you guys I think have that, and many young academies have it, opportunity to be members on the committees which already work and things like this. I think this is the most immediate way where you have a platform to speak up, and then you can of course work on individually, like depending on the organization, on how to kind of broaden that participation. But I think it is important that there is an opportunity given to these voices.
Thank you. You could you please add if you have any comments on that question?
I really agree with Patricia and Jacek about Young Academy. In Japan, our Young Academy of Japan is inside the Science Council of Japan. So there is existing structure already available, and we can use the structure and we can work with the staff inside this Science Council. So it's quite like smooth how we started in Japan, and we are continuing as we grow. So I truly believe that if there is no existing structure, it's quite tough, challenging to start Young Academy. So it's important to communicate with senior scientists and the existing structure so that it can be starting smoothly and sustainably continues.
Yeah, I think having a structured environment that allows you to provide advice in a way that is expected, I think is great. There's the issue also of trust. The senior academy has to trust the younger academy that they've sort of appointed, in knowing that they will provide something that is meaningful and is important, and so on. I think that's important. So I don't think Connie is online because of the time difference. I think it's pretty late in Ghana. And I think it's important to just reflect a little bit on her presentation, not to put you guys on the spot because you're the one who gave the presentation, but I think it would be really important. She noted, so in her reflection, I thought it was really fascinating. So she said, after she finished her PhD, she got involved in a training and a workshop on policy engaged research method, and that changed her perspective entirely, even on her own PhD research. Started to question the PhD, entirely, and how the research questions were framed. And so that brings up the question then, should training in science and policy be done at an earlier stage, even before you embark on your graduate degree and so on? Or do you think there is a path that can be crafted to produce leaders that can be effective in providing scientific advice in the future as they progress through their careers. It's the chicken before the egg or the egg before the chicken. So maybe, Patricia, would you like to start maybe with your comments?
Yeah, I do believe personally, and being a university professor and engaging with younger generations, I see the need of having these type of interactions earlier. Some of our students, what I notice, and I have also experienced this, is that the more you progress in your scientific career, there's this very slow distance that you take from your community, especially when you come from an underrepresented background. So you start distancing from the topics that you actually should be tackling. So I do think that there is a space for having these types of interactions earlier. I think that is going to increase communication between communities and scientists, which we know there's an issue of trust. So I am definitely in favor of that. And there are some scientific organizations that have started to do that, even at the undergraduate level, in summer programs. They do provide, visits to the Capitol, or just talking about how policies are assembled, how governments work with scientists, at least in the US. So my opinion is that it is needed.
You think it's needed even before somebody starts the graduate degrees, for example, right?
Yes, at the undergraduate level and even at the high school level.
That's great. Jacek?
I think it actually goes maybe even deeper here, because I believe that the one of the challenges which we have in providing scientific advice, apart from being effective in reaching out to the policymakers, it's also to make kind of like an... Okay. Oh, I think... Oh, sorry. It's also to have a general public understand the need for the scientific advice, which should play a role in policymaking per se. And I think this can happen already very early on when we start to talk about the democratic societies and stuff like this in schools, in K-12 even education, about elections and things like this. I think this is where we need to really bring the message forward that the policy should be made based on the scientific evidence, or this is the way to go about this. And I think if we instill that that values in the very early on in a broad society, then it will be very much easier later on to come across with this in a public space. And of course, later, as Patricia mentioned, we need this education later for those who want to provide this advice. But I think even earlier on, for those who are on the receiving end of this is also very important in a way. And finally, I think that the experience in science advice is something which you can't just learn from the courses. And I think this is again tying with what we said before, giving opportunities to be involved in the process, whether as an observer, but also as a contributor. There are ways to do that. And even if we initially maybe are not as effective, if you start early, and Connie showed that, then you can be very, very effective very quickly, right? So I think that's maybe where I stop.
Yeah, so in a way, the relevance here is that not only that you're training young scientists to be able to provide policy or equip them with sort of the mindset of understanding how to establish policy, because that impacts their own careers, their PhD dissertations, for example, but also make sure that the public is receptive to science policy, that when we run into something similar to COVID-19 again, we don't end up with a split population, some of which believe COVID exists, some of them believe COVID is a hoax, for example. So there's importance. Yoko, would you like to add some remarks?
Yes, I truly believe that when some like emergency happen and we start to communicate with citizens, it's not very effective. We need to regularly communicate with citizens so that we already have trusting relationship, then we can build what we can do in the emergency period. And also in the medical field, as I belong, it's not very new to provide advice because we provide people about healthcare, how they make decisions based on evidence. But in other fields, like if you are focusing on lab work, it may be not very familiar to provide advice to people. So I believe according to the specialties, it's quite important to have some kind of a training to give advice. And the Global Young Academy has a science leadership program, and we provide new members the leadership program every year. And we also have an event, annual general meeting every year in June, and we provide science leadership program and outreach program for high school students and university students. And this year in Japan, we also provide the opportunity for high school students and university students, graduate students, so younger generation get involved. And for this opportunity, Senior Science Council provide a lot of support for us. It was quite important to have such support. And next year will be in Rwanda. So I believe it's important to provide support for Rwanda so that they can provide a new kind of a training or support for younger generations.
Yeah, that's great. And, you know, I thought your example of providing science advice when you showed the radio part that you were involved with and how the colors and the images are selected because you're really trying to communicate with a specific population, that's very, very clever. I'd like to maybe take some questions from the chat here, and so that we can give people online an opportunity to also participate. So the question we have from see, I hope I don't butcher the name. Vendra. Vendra is good because his last name is so difficult. I apologize. So as a young scientist, what should be our very first step in trying to get involved in policy making in a country where scientists do not get a chance to voice their opinion with any kind of policies? What would be the steps to try to kind of get a buy-in from everybody on the ability to provide advice from scientists? Is there an easy way to kind of get your advice in? Patricia?
Yeah, I haven't been in a country where that happens, but my guess is that try to find where those conversations happening, and maybe make an appointment, try to visit, talk to your representatives, figure out where the conversation happens, and find where the champions are. There's always a champion that will help you get the conversation started, get some input and baby steps. And I think if you generate critical mass and your representatives see that there is a voice and that there is a need and that you really can provide help and identify what are the areas where they get interest, whether it is this is going to get you more voters, this is going to get you more funding, this is going to get you less spending. And try to find where are the key topics where you can find some sort of buy-in, and then start a conversation. And, you know, from the comment I get that it's going to be difficult, but don't give up, because what we see historically is that a lot of good things started being harder. So just I would encourage you to not give up, and also take advantage of these organizations to get input from similar countries where perhaps they have faced this issue before and overcame.
Thank you. Anybody would like to add anything? Jacek or Yoko?
Yeah, maybe just a couple of words. So from my experience, of course, it depends where you are in the world, but it seems that sometimes it is easier to get involved in the process either on the region, on the local level than the national level through the direct like individual contacts with the local leaders, whether it is your city or village or whatever else, or on the other perspective through the international organizations. So sometimes national level is the most difficult one to get involved in because it requires often a lot of very kind of careful also navigating the politics and these voting aspects of voters and the politicians and so on. So I think going through to the organizations which are international ones like GIA or others, or locally through your own contacts, might be actually an easy way to do that. But I also wanted to mention one thing. I think it is really important to remember that there are two different ways of getting involved. One is as an expert, and for that we have to remember, and we talk about diversity and stuff, but we have to remember about the excellence, right? So expert is we have to maintain the excellence of the advice if we are talking about the role of an expert. It doesn't have to be seniority is not, in my opinion, something which means whether you are an expert or excellent or not, but you need to have an excellent contributor if we talk about the expert role. But you can be also a facilitator, and that is a different type of role. And in these roles, someone who doesn't have this confirmed scientific excellence there, but has a broad recognition of science, for example, can really find their way as well. So thanks.
Yoko?
I also I agree with Jacek that nowadays the social issues are not very simple. It's very complicated. We need to work with different disciplines in interdisciplinary work so that we can properly address the social issues and make proper policy. So for that, we need to get used to interdisciplinary work. It's sometimes challenges. So from the beginning, you need to start training or kind of experience in working interdisciplinary. But as Jacek said, if you are not expert in any area, it's quite difficult to provide your contribution to the interdisciplinary team. So I believe first you can develop your own expertise, then you can join the interdisciplinary team, then you can properly address the social issues.
Thank you. And of course, there's the possibility of you are allowed to voice your opinion and provide advice, but no one does anything with it. That's another layer of difficulties, of something that you have to deal with. Just a quick clarification question for Yoko. We have a question from Woo Sung Jung. He is with the Korean Young Academy, and he's asking, is the Japanese Young Academy only concerned with citizen science, or are you also providing science advice to Senior Academy?
Yes, we do different kinds of work. We have 8 committees, and we also join the committee of Senior Academy. But because of the time limit, I only describe about citizen science. So if you want to know more about the Young Academy of Japan, I recommend watching our video I showed in my presentation. Then you can learn more about what we do.
Thank you. We have the next question from Tom Solomon, who's in the room with us. Tom, yeah, go ahead, please.
This is Tom, your AV Tech. Just to let you know, we're not hearing you at all.
We need to turn this on. I've tried. Should I come next to your machine because they can hear you? See if you can hear you now. Tom,
we're hearing you now.
Okay, great. All right, I'll give you the short version. It's clear this has worked really well, this initiative in some countries, and we're just starting on this in the UK. And I'm just interested in how, I think it was in America, you went from 500 people who wanted to become members of the Academy to 18, how you made that choice, and then how you keep all those other people engaged and they don't become totally disenfranchised and fed up with the whole thing. And I guess that's especially important when you mentioned that you need flexibility and people sometimes can't continue a project and need to go off and do other things. So how do you do that rather than this just being a rather elusive and elite club for a small number of people who are going to do very well out of the whole exercise?
But Patricia, you could start because I know you probably have some thoughts on this. And if we could please make it a little short because we have only 12 minutes left and we'd like to go to more questions. Thank you.
Sure. So I didn't really participate in the selection. That was the senior academies that selected a group of advisors that score applications, and there was a rubric based on the main goals that were established for our group based on the grant that was supporting it, which was diversifying the academies and providing a way to connect with communities and outreach. So I don't really know exactly how that process was, but my understanding is that there was a rubric and there were 2 sets of selection by these members. And then at the very end, it was the senior academies approving the process. Now, with regards to the flexibility, so we see that on a case-to-case basis, and that comes down with having clear goals and communication, and where people feel confident in communicating when they need help, when they need to be reassigned. I'll give you an example. Earlier this year, I became the chair of my department, and I contacted the academies and I said, I don't think I can continue to be co-chair. And then they appreciated that because now Hussam is a co-chair. And so everybody is capable of doing everything in the group. It's just a matter of, where are they placed in their careers or in their time or with their ability to contribute. But communication is key. So as long as you establish those clear communication pathways, it shouldn't delay the projects. There's also people that don't show up, and there's also people that have to step down because they get a position in government that prevents them from being in the group. And for that, we haven't replaced anybody, but there are certainly mechanisms to do that. And the final thing I'm going to say is that we did keep track of everybody who applied, at least for the second cohort, and that is the list that we're using to feed that network that I mentioned with the map box. So we, for the people that are local to Washington, D.C., when we meet there, we let them know, and we have had a social event where they showed up and they met with us. And then for other projects, whenever we need expertise that we are asked from the senior academies that a task force has to be assembled, for example, we do reach out to them as potential experts. So just the process of applying is helpful to the academies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any remarks from our panelists?
If I may, I think, Tom, there's several different modes or ways different academies operate. And there are some academies where the selection process is purely in the hands of the senior academy. There are academies where the selection is shared between senior academy and the current academy members. And there is a way where actually the young academy elects the new cohort on themselves. And I think there are advantages and disadvantages of all of the things. That there's not enough time to discuss all of them, but I also encourage you to look into the GYA kind of like a form which tells you how to get around establishing the academy. And I know GYA has been involved strongly in the Great Britain's Young Academy as well, establishment. And from my personal perspective, I think having both senior selection committee to ensure certain credibility of excellence, but also having a junior selection committee to ensure the relevance of the people elected to the activities of the group. They are both very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yoko,
may
you
I
have
add
some moment? Yeah, absolutely, please. Yeah.
In Young Academy of Japan, we also had a selection by Senior Academy, but we had several spots available that we can select members ourselves. So if somebody who uniquely contributed to our group, we select ourselves. So if somebody really wants to join the activity, you can just contact the person. Then there could be the way you can be involved in any aspect. And Global Young Academy, when I was an executive committee, I had several meetings among Young Academy and National Young Academy. So if you don't have any Young Academy in the country, you can contact with GYA so that GYA can provide according to advice according to the situation you are in.
Thank you. Right. So the next question, the next question is actually the same question I had for you, Jacek, also, which is you've touched on an important point in saying that the work that is done by early and mid-career researchers in relation to Young Academies is not always appreciated by your home institution. This same comment has been made by Sir Charles Catalo, and I had the same question for you. So maybe again briefly, if we could go through Jacek, then Patricia, then Yoko, just please give us quick remarks of your thoughts on this and how important it is. Thank you.
Thanks. So I think it is really critical that we formally recognize these non-traditional activities like science, non-traditionally academic activities like science advice or other activities like this, but we also reward those who engage in those activities in terms of their career progress. And we don't have time for that, but I encourage you also to look into the Netherlands, where they have established a new reward and recognition systems, where these activities in science advice, science for policy, are actually a part of the normal career progress in the academia. So I think that's something which we need to do, because it is not sustainable the way it is done now. And many of us probably do that because we have some support, more formal or less formal, from our institutions. But there's a lot of people who want to do that but can't because they don't have that support. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Yoko.
Go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, my opinion is, and my experience with this is, it really depends on the institution you're in. It's not necessarily the country. I think the fact that we don't have this formal training in graduate education is a flaw of the education system. The way that we reward people in academia, the people who become tenure, are not the ones who are doing things outside of the lab. Well, if you remember my introduction, this is my third institution. So obviously there's been places that have been more supportive than others in my own career. But that being said, our students are not going to be all academics. Actually, a minority of them are going to be academics. So the institutions that are realizing this and the educators that are realizing this are taking the steps to provide education to the trainees. And if your institution does not have support, that's where professional societies step in. We have in the US, we have the AAAS, we have American Physiological Society, American Thoracic Society, pretty much all of them at any point in their national meetings, they do have a session or a day where there is engagement with scientists that are in policy. And also organizations have career days where they bring alumni, and there's always one doing that. So I think at this point, in institutions where there is not much support, we have to rely on our networks and on those champions that are in our networks. But down the road, it's time for institutions to realize that this is a crucial part of education in a scientist career, and the institutions that make that change are going to be the ones who are going to recruit more students and be more successful.
Yoko, if you could please try to make it quick, because we still need to do the survey. Thank you.
So I totally agree with Jacek about the reward and evaluation. Young Academy of Japan recently had a symposium about research evaluation, and we have a lot of activity with local community or local governments and these national activities, but we don't really get rewarded for that. It's we don't work for the reward, but as Jacek said, it's not very sustainable. So we are trying to change the system, and we want to have a discussion with global community on this regard. And as Jacek said, Netherlands has a good example. So if we can start discussion among national young academies, a global community, it would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have a lot more questions, and they're all really interesting. We're running out of time. I think the wonderful comment from John Hildebrand on science policy shouldn't be either or. Training should happen at the same time. You should progress in your career. We have a wonderful comment also from Muhammad Ibrahim, who's talking about strategies to make sure that science policy advice by policymakers are actually being considered. There are many other comments. Willa talked about her TWAS, Young Affiliates Network, and please visit the website. I can't go over everything. I apologize. The speakers did a wonderful job answering the question, and I think now we just have 2 minutes remaining for the survey. So if you could please take the survey, and I'll just, in conclusion, I just want to thank all the speakers. They did an exceptional job with their presentations and answering the questions. Thank you.